Alright, so this is a 99 Honda Accord. I'm doing a 5-speed manual transmission replacement. First thing I do is jack up the car for 4 jack stands. Then we're going to want to take the wheels off. On this one there's 4 lug, not the 5. And they're 19mm lug nuts. Both sides. What I like to do is take the hood off. There are 4, 1, 2. On the other side, 3, 4. 10mm bolts go into the hood right here. Taking the hood off gives you a lot more room to work with, and if you're limited on light, helps a lot with the light getting into the engine bay. I only have 3 light bars in here, plus 1 for my workbench right here. I like to start on top of the engine since we're up here already. So first thing I'll do is take off this air box, including the battery tray, and then whatever else I can see I can get to that's up here. One thing that helps when you're replacing a transmission like this is when you have the one you're replacing it with, to use it as a reference as far as where are all the mounting bolts at, electrical connectors and sensors, and everything else if you're unfamiliar with it. So once the battery's out and you have it stored, not on the ground, I'm going to go ahead and take off this battery tray just to make a little bit more room getting inside this engine bay. It's only 12mm bolt there and a 12mm bolt right there. Then there was also a bracket right here for some AC lines and a wire loom. So we'll go ahead and take that off. Take off this tray. One thing I like to do when working on a big project like this is whenever you take off a bolt, the one down there, is to put them back where you got them. That way you don't lose them or misplace them. Here I'm using a Worth brand Rust Off Max Ice. It's a lot like a PB blaster. I got all this stuff when I was working at Audi, so might as well use the stuff you get for free. After getting this bolt out, my socket was seized to it because of how much rust there was. So a good trick is to throw it on the ground. Or grab a hammer. I don't know if you caught that or not, but also you can use your hammer and just hammer on the socket. The shock will bring it loose, and it also kind of moves the outer roundness of the socket. So this little bracket here on the battery tray, this coolant overflow tank reservoir slides into it going in. So there's a little tab that rests right in here. This tab here, you take a flathead, pop it out, and what I did was kind of stuck in there, so I took a rubber mallet. Once I got it out of here, tap the bottom of the reservoir to tap it out. We can just leave it sit over there. We have this overflow line, so we'll just let it sit right here because we're working right here. So go and move this. There was also another bolt underneath that battery tray. I didn't have to loosen it because this one looks like whoever took it off before didn't tighten that bolt. So that's going to go in and hold that battery tray right there. So here's where it was sitting. That's the third one. Next is the air tank. So take these off. Simple pop. Pop. 4. Then you take a flathead, this hose right here, take off, and then there's a line right here with the hose clamp. You just take a pair of pliers. Now we can take this off. Oh, look, taking it off, I noticed this is damaged, but it's not too big of a deal. We can tape that up or see if the customer wants to buy a new one. This car is a MAP instead of a MAF. This is manifold absolute pressure sensor. This guy right here. Normally, sometimes you'll have a sensor at the air filter, which is mass airflow sensor. So a lot of times you'll see a sensor right in the air intake, which measures the mass airflow going to the vehicle. But this one is manifold absolute, so the absolute pressure in the manifold gives it a better reading, makes the engine run a little bit better. So here we can leave this together because it's not going to be in our way to get in this area. Here, just one connected back here, so now we have all this free room right here. So now we'll see what all the electrical connectors are we need to disconnect, and then also we'll need to remove the slave cylinder for the clutch. What we'll do is take those two, looks like 12mm bolts off the housing bracket. That way we don't have to mess with the clutch line. One thing we're going to want to do is take off the starter. There's one of the bolts right there and the other one underneath. Now it's safe to remove the starter now because we disconnected battery power. Starter has live power to it at all times. The only time it's engaged is when you give it the signal from turning the key, and it gives it a ground. So right here are your wires. So whenever you have your battery connected, and let's say you're down there with a wrench and you actually you're on some kind of bolt on the engine because the engine's grounded, and you go and you hit the starter power wire, well, it's live all times. Well, now you just welded your wrench or whatever, which I've done a couple times. Happens to everybody. So we'll take off what's next and go from there. So there's a 12mm bolt here and one right here. That holds a bracket for this wiring harness right here. So we'll go ahead and remove that because it's on the transmission housing. So go ahead and remove that. So we have those two bolts off. And then I'm going to work on the starter. Starter has every starter has a ground cable. This one just plugs right into here, this piece here. That little block right there is the ground. You can see it's just a male-female type connector. Next we're going to work on this positive wire. I already took the bolt off, or nut. It is a 12mm nut on top of this. Make sure it don't move. So to remove the starter itself, if you can see that, this right here, it's a 14mm. I believe it's a bolt. It also holds the transmission to the engine. so it's part of the transmission housing, the bell housing, to mount it to the engine. And then there's another one right underneath the starter. We'll go ahead and remove those and get the starter out of the way.